So today, I call on the Biden administration to boycott the Chinese Winter Olympics. I'll now take your questions.
You mentioned it briefly, but what is your message, though, to all those athletes who have worked hard for so long to go to these Winter Games? And also, it didn't seem like from 1980, the only people who were penalized at the end of the day were the athletes. So how do you rectify it? What do you tell them?
Well, again, I sympathize with the approximately 300 athletes who are going to compete in these games for the United States, should we compete. I regret that it's come to this. But the responsibility for a boycott rests on the failures of the Biden administration. Many senators, for many months, have been calling on the Biden administration to relocate these games. That was feasible. The Winter Olympics are far smaller than the Summer Olympics. There's probably half a dozen countries in the world today that could host the Winter Olympics on 6 months or 12 months' notice. The Biden administration didn't take those steps. They probably didn't take them because they wanted Xi Jinping's cooperation at the Glasgow Climate Change Conference. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think it's an accident that the administration only leaked its plans of a so-called diplomatic boycott after that climate change conference ended. And second, the blame rests with the international Olympic movement, who should not award games to communist tyrannies. So again, I regret that these athletes would not have the opportunity to compete in these Olympics. I hope that most of them would be able to compete in Italy in 2026. But the blame rests on the Biden administration for failing to lead, for failing to protect our own athletes while they're in China, and on the leaders of the international Olympic movement.
Two questions. First, I know you said a diplomatic boycott is the minimum, but are you supportive of Senator Young and others' amendments to include that language in the NDAA? And separately on the NDAA, can you give us any update on your efforts to try to amend the legislation requiring women to be drafted?
So first, I do support legislative efforts to impose a diplomatic, and I would add economic boycott. Corporate sponsors of these games should not be traveling to celebrate Chinese communists. However, that is probably going to be too little and too late. And now it's not enough either. The administration made clear in their response to my June letter that they obviously do not have a plan to protect our athletes from the threats that the Chinese Communist Party poses to them. Ubiquitous surveillance and DNA harvesting, or even hostage taking. So it's too little and too late at this point.
Hi, so I'm wondering, do you think that by not taking this action, if they decide not to do the diplomatic boycott, or they don't take even stronger action, do you think that it's in some way indirectly supporting these human rights abuses?
Well, I can only assume the Biden administration is at least going to announce a diplomatic boycott. Again, I believe that they waited until after the Glasgow Climate Change Conference to announce it because they didn't want to offend Xi Jinping beforehand. But now, having floated that trial balloon, if they in fact don't announce that diplomatic boycott, if they allow the Secretary of State or the Vice President or someone else to lead a delegation to China, I think it would be an appalling lack of judgment and failure of moral leadership to support with a diplomatic presence the Chinese Communist Party, which is committing genocide against its own people. And that's not just a judgment I've made, that's a judgment that Joe Biden's State Department has made.
One more question for you. So you mentioned the organ harvesting, and this is a really crucial issue, particularly with Falun Gong practitioners in China. I know there's been some resolution here in Congress to help this issue, to condemn the issue. Why do you think that it hasn't moved forward, and what can the U.S. do to help this move forward?
Well, unfortunately, you have a lot of panda huggers in Congress who don't want to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party and who are carrying water for the Biden administration, who care more about things like getting Xi Jinping to make some fantastical promise about carbon emissions 30 years in the future, or to buy cheap solar panels that probably won't work, as most things from China don't work, as part of their big Green New Deal. So you've got a lot of panda huggers in Congress who are prioritizing these areas of what they perceive as needed cooperation with the Chinese communists, as opposed to standing up to a nation committing genocide against its own people.
Do you think that the administration could also take an action sooner to urge a new location? With a year's notice, it gets more difficult.
So the Trump administration took a much firmer stand on some of these issues, like announcing that it was a genocide against the religious and ethnic minorities in Xinjiang province, or imposing sanctions for those Chinese officials who cracked down in Hong Kong. I would have supported earlier action. It is feasible, though. It would have been feasible to move these Olympics as early as January, even the summer. Again, these are the Winter Olympics we're talking about, not the Summer Olympics. The Winter Olympics are far smaller scale than are the Summer Olympics. And if the Biden administration had taken it seriously from the very beginning, if they had rallied support of our allies, I'm confident we could have found a free and democratic country that could have hosted these Winter Olympics on short notice.